How would you say Taiwan's attitudes have changed over the decades towards migrant workers?
The general public finally realized that we need them rather than they come to us and then they try to steal our jobs.
What do you hear from them as the main reason why workers would become undocumented or stay under the radar? And what is the advice you give them?
I think a large social opinion about them is that they leech off the society or they make the crime rate go higher. But the reality is that they still have to work the dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs that no one else would take because they still have to provide for their families back home.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. There are around 700,000 migrant workers in Taiwan. The majority of them come from Southeast Asia and mostly work as caregivers or in blue-collar jobs. Now, despite Taiwan's critical need for this workforce, they face many issues, including restrictive bureaucracy, an exploitative brokerage system, and frequent abuse from employers. In Connected's previous discussions, we examined the nature of those numerous problems, but today we want to focus on what needs to be done to ensure migrant workers have their rights upheld and are treated with dignity. And that is why today's guests have hands-on experience in trying to improve the lives of Taiwan's migrant workers. Joining us from Taipei, we welcome Professor Hsiao-chuan from the National Chengchi University. And also from Taipei, we have Julia Mariano, who's the spokesperson for the Taiwan chapter of Migrante International and a volunteer at a shelter for migrant workers. Thank you both so much for joining this program today. I'm going to start with you, Hsiao-chuan, and ask you, in what context do you work with migrant workers hands-on?
Yeah, I work with various migrant workers or migrant population, including blue-collar migrant workers and also marriage migrants, meaning those who immigrate to Taiwan through marriages. And we started, talking about issues and also work together to advocate for some policy changes. That's the context I work with those people.
And Julia, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization and what they do?
So I'm from Migrante International, and we are a worldwide organization, and I'm here for the Taiwan chapter. So for Migrante, we are a grassroots organization, and while we do help assist in the campaigns and we advocate for the rights of migrant workers, we also always make sure to politicize and connect it to the issues back home and the political issues that the migrants face. So we delve into a lot of political campaigning as well as doing welfare work. And while I also volunteer for the Shelter Underserved the People's Association, where I help with translation and any paralegal assistance that I could provide them.
And when you say back home, where do you mean?
So I come from the Philippines, and I have been in Taiwan as a student and have been involved in the organization since I came to Taiwan. So another part of that is also helping organize workers' unions and helping assist the migrant workers.
Hsiao-chuan, Taiwan has recognized its need for migrant workers to fill many jobs that perhaps locals can't or won't do. So in 1992, they started letting companies hire migrant workers. How would you say Taiwan's attitudes have changed over the decades towards migrant workers?
Well, I think the biggest change is that the general public finally realized that we need them rather than they come to us and then they try to steal our jobs. Because at the beginning, even the government kind of hinted that, we open the market, so we allow them to come, but we have to watch them. We have to be very careful that they're creating problems, crimes, and so on and so forth. That attitude still remains, but I think that increasingly more people actually realize that we need them in many aspects.
Julia, you've been in Taiwan for a number of years. How have attitudes changed since you came here?
Attitudes with the general public, I would say there has been an increase of interest in people who want to advocate and want to help advocate and organize for them. But I would say with regards to how the government's attitude is towards the migrants, we need to look at the structural policies that are still in place, the racist policies that are still in place. The campaign for, say, for example, the campaign for caretakers to have a designated time to rest and a designated day off. Until now, they still don't have it. And even during COVID times, there have been policies that were put in place to bar migrant workers from cross-category transfers. A lot of policies that don't resolve a lot of their issues from its root. And I would say one of the changes was in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, they increased the minimum wage of the workers from 17,000 to 20,000. It's not a lot. If we're talking about change, there is change, but there is very slow change, and there is still so much more work to be done.
Right, and I do want to talk about salaries and compensation for migrant workers a little later in this program, but I want to go back to this idea of attitudes. And one of the loudest arguments raised against giving migrant workers equal opportunities is the fact that around 80,000 are working in Taiwan illegally. Now, often this happens after overstaying their visa or breaking employment conditions. But for many, staying under the radar is their only option to escape intolerable or abusive working conditions. Chengchi is a media executive who dedicated a large part of his career to highlighting migrant workers' issues, and here's his take.
我们现在对待蓝领外劳3天没有到职的蓝领外劳是必须报警。那我说的就地合法，也许在这个上面可以就，因为他不用动到立法院，他并不是需要什么改什么法令，它是规定上面好。那你如果现在回来，你现在如果愿意所谓自首。你愿意自首，好说啊，对不起，我旷职了，然后跳槽了，那可能缴个罚款，可是我允许你这政府允许这样的工作，允许你继续在台湾工作赚钱。那当然这个是纯理想状况，因为如果这一道法令开了，这个规定开了，那大家都自由转换雇主，所以所有的台湾雇主就会很担心我的员工会跑走。但是你想想看，这种担心合不合理？它也存在在台湾人自己的就业市场里面。我们自己当老板的，或自己当员工的，当老板的好了，当老板的其实也随时在担心员工会跳槽。我觉得我说的就地合法，只是让蓝领外籍劳工回到现代国家该有的就业条件而已。
Hsiao-chuan, what do you suggest needs to be done for the tens of thousands who overstay or have to stay under the radar?
Right. I think we have to look at why there are the so-called undocumented, or the government used to call them runaways. Exactly because the policy is structured in such a way that blue-collar migrant workers have no freedom to change employers. So if the employer is abusive, or like the working condition is so bad that it cannot bear it anymore, or there are jobs that have higher salaries, and I want to move to a better jobs. What's wrong with that, right? But the migrant policy is that if you are blue collar, you are classified as blue collar workers. You don't have that simple freedom. So the only way you can change employer is to so-called run away and become undocumented, become under the radar. So actually, it's the government's policy that create a big number of the so-called runaway. So I think the fundamental solution to solve that is to change the policy. You don't categorize people into the white collar who have more freedom. They can change employer if they want. And the blue collar who is bound by in one specific employers, and that they cannot have the freedom and they cannot have the rights and so on and so forth. That's the fundamental problems that we have to correct, and that's the only way to change the situation.
And Julia, what does your organization and perhaps the shelters you work with, what do you hear from them as the main reason why workers would become undocumented or stay under the radar? And what is the advice you give them?
So for us, we see this as they are the victims of this social this structure that has not favored them. So a lot of these runaway workers are victims of abuse, and because they don't have they don't have the avenue, they don't have the freedom to just transfer. They have no other choice but to run away from their employers. And I think a large social opinion about them is that they leech off of the society, or they make the crime rate go higher. But the reality is that even the undocumented workers, and especially the undocumented workers, they still have to work dirty and dangerous jobs. They still have to work the dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs that no one else would take, because they still have to provide for their families back home. So they still contribute to the economy. They are just as important to our society. And us who benefit from their labor, who benefit from them keeping our society together, it is also our responsibility to help reach out to them, to help safeguard them, and help provide avenues for them, help mediate for them, and provide legal assistance.
I want to take a bigger picture look here. Now, the global labor markets in 2024 are very different from those from when they were created. A labor shortage is looming over Taiwan's rapidly aging population, and more countries in the region are in the same situation. They're now competing for skilled laborers. However, those workers who choose to stay and contribute still face an uphill battle. Once again, here's Chengchi.
据我们现在了解，那个留才政策还是很硬啊。就是他必须要雇主来申请，台湾雇主觉得这个外籍劳工适合留下来，我们帮他申请下来。那但是申请下来之后，我觉得他这个制度上有一些人性上的弱点，就是我让他留下来之后，他就可以完全照着台湾相对可以照着台湾的薪资制度来做，所以你简单说就是要加薪。那我让你留下来之后，你要加薪。那的确很考验雇主的善意，或者考验雇主是不是真的很需要这个人，所以他其实不太能大规模的来执行，那这是还有待改进的地方。
Hsiao-chuan, what needs to be in place for migrant workers to be paid adequately for the work they do, or at least equally?
Well, I think you mentioned it's many countries are competing for the labor force. So I think that it's not just about the I think of course equal pay is very important, and I think more than that is that they have to have equal rights and the benefits, like the fundamental freedom to change employer, or even their rights to stay if they want, if they prefer to become residents or even become citizens. That should be possible. But now the policy is that if you're blue-collar workers, you are not qualified to apply for residency unless you become so-called upscale to middle scale or white-collar work. So I think to compete with other countries to have more migrants that are willing to stay in Taiwan, we not only have to increase the salary, but also to create an environment where there are even equal rights, equal benefits, and have the chance to become citizens or residents if they prefer.
It's amazing how institutional this discrimination is, and how it's so broadly accepted in so many countries. It's the same situation where migrant workers cannot get a path to residency. Going back to the salary issue or the financial issue, Julia, how do migrant workers, or what help do they need when it comes to managing their money or understanding their value?
So, for example, for caretakers, they still have to pay for their occupational insurance. Fees like that should be shouldered by the company or the employer themselves. They add up to the burden of the migrant workers who already do not earn the minimum wage. So they have to pay, they have to shoulder their own food, for example, their own food, and paying for their dormitories for factory workers. Even though when they started out in the Philippines, it is promised to them that they will be given board and lodging and food for free. When they come to Taiwan, they still have to pay for these things.
So that brings me to the brokerage system here. Hsiao-chuan, why does the government insist on having this brokerage system when it could be so easily abused?
I think you are raising very fundamental and very important questions. That's the question that many migrant advocates and migrant groups are asking the government. Why do you keep on doing that? For me, I think the answer is that they don't have to be responsible for the issues. They can always say that, oh, it's because the brokers are so bad, so abusive, and then we can have blacklist them. But then they will change name and become another company. That's the old story we'll hear. So I think the broker systems is created so that the government can escape from their own very important responsibility.
Julia, what's your take on this? What is an alternative to the brokerage system? Is this brokerage system even working?
I think another alternative to the brokerage system is the fair recruitment policy, and that entails that the employers will pay the broker's fee, and it shifts all of the burden that was on the worker into the employers, into the companies that need these workers in the first place. There are also workers who call for the abolishment of the brokerage system and for there to be a government-to-government hiring.
And speaking of, if we go back to the idea of the labor shortage here, Hsiao-chuan, we understand that Taiwan is planning to bring in about 100,000 workers from India into Taiwan. What are your main concerns about what they'll face?
Well, I think the main concern is that, as you all know, and we discussed a little bit earlier, that there are a lot of structural problems that are not fixed yet. I think that's dangerous because the system is already saying that it's not working. How can you expect that we can accept more migrant workers from different countries and giving them equal respect and rights and benefits and all that? I think that will only make the situation even worse. So I think from my position, I think the first issue that we have to deal with is to fix the problems that we have been raising for decades. And then we can discuss whether it's necessary to have a different source of migrant workers to come to Taiwan.
Right. So one way for workers to come in is through this brokerage system or a government initiative. Another way for workers to settle in Taiwan is to marry a citizen. Filmmaker Jay Chern spoke to director Liu Chunyu, whose short films highlight the plight of migrant workers in Taiwan. And he had this to say about the young women who marry in Taiwan.
我是在新竹的一个小镇长大的客家人。我在某个时期自己也有出国打工，对，我到了澳洲还有纽西兰。那好像在那一段时间里面，蛮能体会说你人在异乡的一种身体跟心理的状态。我从国外一回到台湾，就注意到很多移工在台湾的处境，所以我觉得在这方面的创作应该还会再持续。包含我今年自己也是拍了一部关于越南新住民，因为某个时期台湾非常多的买卖的婚姻，那买卖的婚姻它有它基本矛盾的地方，因为婚姻是买卖的，那你是来传宗接代的，那它会不会在一个我们对婚姻这个概念的认知上产生了很多冲突跟矛盾？那这些女性怎么样在一个为了摆脱自己母国的贫穷，那透过牺牲自己的身体的方式生存？那他真的得到了，在这个牺牲的生存里面，他真的得到了他要的东西吗？或者是他会不会在这个过程里面，有些东西永远都回不去了？
And you can watch the full version of this on our YouTube channel and TaiwanPlus website. Hsiao-chuan, what can Taiwan do better for people who marry and come here or get settled through marriage?
Well, I think the fundamental the thing is that, again, they come to Taiwan because we need them. Okay. Earlier we talked about labor force and the marriage, because they are not here alone. They stay in Taiwan because they are partner, spouse of our Taiwanese citizens, and so they have to be treated equally. And what do you mean by treated equally? From the policies and laws, that they should be given equal rights as citizens, or if they are they have children, the children and the family and the marriage migrants should not be discriminated. But unfortunately, even until now, we still have a lot of stories that the marriage migrants or their children are being discriminated. These children are being bullied at school, or the marriage migrants are mistreated by the employers, or even their families, or even the general societies. That's the thing that we have been working on to create a more open, inclusive society.
Julia, in your experience with marriage migrants, what needs to be done to take away some of these stereotypes and attitudes that we hear about, and what kind of help often do they need?
I think one thing that gets overlooked is that there is an inherent power imbalance between the marriage migrant and the local Taiwanese. So one person relies on the other for their residency here, and sometimes actually because it is buying the marriage, then there is already an uneven power balance between the two parties. And so what actually happens behind closed doors sometimes is these people who came to Taiwan to work find this opportunity to settle here through marriage because they are still in a more vulnerable place. Even through marriage, sometimes they still end up in abusive situations.
May I add something about the marriage?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the issue is not whether they are being a commodity to be bought by the husbands or the Taiwanese citizens. They are people, but they are treated as a commodity to be bought. But it's not only just the husbands or the Taiwanese spouse. It's actually the society and the government treat them as a commodities and suspect them that they come here just to dig gold, or just to manipulate the system to become Taiwanese citizens, and so on and so forth. So actually, the policy the laws created by the government is creating the image of the marriage migrants being treated as a commodity, being treated as a product being bought. And that's something we have to abolish, that they are people, they are married our Taiwanese citizens, and they should be treated equally.
I want to go to another point that Juan brought up, and that's the next generation. Now, Taiwan presents itself as an open and welcoming society, but that's not always the reality. Filmmaker Hsiao-chuan brings us this story of an Indonesian mother and her daughter trying to fit in.
无论是我们从哪一个国家，那我们生出来的小朋友，就算新住民子都是新二代。以前常常我们新住民就是被贴一个标签，甚至新二代都不敢说出去妈妈来自哪一国。之前也常常一些比较大的小孩，那个姐妹都之前讲，甚至出去外面的说，等一下不要到门口，你到旁边一点，我再走过去。那我个人其实我一直都会鼓励我小孩，从小也是都双重文化都要认识，然后学习。那也是跟他说，其实妈妈也不是台湾人，也是从印尼过来，但是一样都是中文也会讲，印尼也会讲，然后台湾料理会煮，印尼料理也会煮。就那一般台湾妈妈可能只会煮台湾的料理，只会讲台湾的语言。那你身为一个就台湾小孩的台湾印尼的小孩，那其实他身上要学习的东西很多，然后你身体的本身从一出生要接触的环境跟别人会不一样。那甚至小时候都问你是妈妈是哪里？他说妈妈是印尼，那我是台湾印尼人。
And once again, for the full version of that feature, do head over to our YouTube channel or the TaiwanPlus website. Hsiao-chuan, does Taiwanese society regard the second generation, those who are born here to migrant parents, as Taiwanese, and do they treat them as such?
Right. I think in terms of rhetoric, now they are saying that we are a multicultural society, and these second generation are valued because they are they're helping Taiwanese to expand our trade or to reach out to the market in Southeast Asia. But in reality, it's a different story. It's a different because there are many stories where the second generation they are afraid to speak up that their mother are from Southeast Asia. If their skin color is closer to Taiwanese, they can pass as Taiwanese. They will never say that my mother is from this and that country. If they have darker skin, maybe they could be mocked, bullied at school. And unfortunately, the studies show that the marriage migrants' children have a higher rate of having eating disorder, which reflect the anxiety and the emotional disorder they face at school. So I think that study actually showed that in reality, the society is still not inclusive enough. Although we may say that it's improving, but we have a lot more to do to make sure that these children are treated as equals as any other kids.
And Julia, we're just about running out of time, so I want to give you the last question here about what should be done for the migrant children in particular, whose future lies here in Taiwan.
I think one is to have the structural policies in place that will safeguard them from discrimination, and the other is to protect them from social discrimination as well. I think a lot of education should be done to the Taiwanese population. I think Southeast Asian people, it's worthy to be mentioned in classes that Taiwanese people take in their basic education, to mention who these Southeast Asian people are, why they come to Taiwan, what they contribute to Taiwan, what their culture is, and why and how we can treat them just the same, and also to appreciate their culture and contribution, because they have contributed so much, and their culture is part of Taiwan.
And that is definitely worth remembering. Hsiao-chuan from National Chengchi University, thank you so much for your time and insight. And Julia Mariano from Migrante, Taiwan, thank you also for your time. And for our viewers everywhere, it has been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you'd like to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And do stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.